thank you very much for having me here. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my own personal journey to doing design in the public sector. And so these are some hashtags for today. And I really appreciate being here. It's such an amazing community that I've been able to meet and to be a little bit of a part of. And that's a great honor. And it's a great thing to see happening in Europe. Certainly not something that when I first started doing user experience in the mid-90s, we didn't have these kind of conferences, except maybe in a few places like in the Bay Area. And so this is a fantastic thing. And you guys have such an amazing talent and potential. And I want to talk a little bit about how you can apply that. Hopefully I can make you think about how you're applying that talent and potential. That there's a real opportunity for user experience to make a difference in the world, not just for making a startup great, not just for making an application great, but for making a difference. So why I'm here today? Well, to start with, I actually had to fly here, right? So I live in Canada in a city called Edmonton, and I had a couple stops on my way to Lisbon in Toronto and in the UK. But the real reason that I'm here is in 1996, I was doing web design, and I ran into Jacob Nilsson. In 1997, I ran into work that Jared Spool had been doing. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to use the things that I'm learning and actually design things so they work better for people. In 2003, I started my own company. And in starting my own firm, I actually had some success. We actually grew, worked with the Fortune 500, some startups in Silicon Valley, and we got invited to pitch against some of the very best firms of the business. Sometimes we even won, which was largely a function of price and not necessarily of the client's first choice. But I burnt out. I had thought when I started that I wanted to be like my friends at Argus Associates or Adaptive Path and build a company that did that. But bigger and better was not for me. And so I needed to reboot. And in 2009, I left my firm in the good hands of my partner. And I said, you know, I'm really going to chase a fundamental question that I've been thinking about. The question is this: what happens if we start to think about the citizen experience the same way that we would think about customer experience? How does design help government, help the public sector work better for people? And that fundamental question has driven me for the last 4.5 years in the work that I do. So, like Mike was talking about this morning, you can choose to work on meaningful things. And I made that choice. I said, I'm going to leave my commercial consulting practice. I'm only going to work with public sector clients. And so that's what I've been doing. I'm here to tell you kind of the ideas that brought me to that point, and then to share some stories with you about some things that other people have been doing, as well as some of the work that I've been able to be part of. So, government faces real challenges today. If any of you, are there any public servants, people who work in government here today? Can we give them a quick round of applause? Thank you. Fantastic, amazing people work in government, but there is a tremendous challenge. You know, globalization, the economy, climate change, all kinds of challenges. And so it's going to actually get worse. We already are seeing some crazy trends happening, and this is the one that scares me the most. This is the paradox of, as we have an aging population, we have a lower tax base and fewer workers, so we have fewer resources for government. At the same time, that aging population increases demands on services. How do we resolve that gap? Well, I don't have the entire answer to that, but I know that we can't keep the status quo. We have to redesign government. We have to be able to do things differently than we have been doing. It's easy to say, well, we need to do something different, but that kind of begs the question, well, how do we do it? And what I'm going to share with you today is really just one part of the puzzle, and lots of people are working on this, and there's a lot of different great things happening. But the thing that really hit me, especially 5 years ago, was what the parallels were between industry. When I first started in design in the mid-90s, people didn't talk about design very often. But there was a transformation in different companies like Target or Apple, where they focused on customer experience, and that really changed the companies. And we saw that happen from the 90s into the 2000s. And so if we think about customer experience, having that kind of transformative effect in industry, what happens when we think about citizen experience? Now, I want you to think about your own citizen experience for a second. Your experience as a citizen. And I want to know where your I love the government t-shirt is. Because people have I love Apple t-shirts. Where's your I love government shirt? Now, this is a picture from the Department of Motor Vehicles in a state in the United States, where you have to go to renew your driver's license. And it's almost the caricature of government services, because everybody has to go, lots of queues, lots of waiting, often doesn't seem very organized. Maybe there are easier ways to do that here in Portugal, and I actually haven't applied for a Portuguese driver's license, so I'm not quite sure. But so the question then, how do we change the citizen experience? Well, we can think about customer experience design, which has lots and lots of different names. Or we can think about citizen experience design. And citizen experience design actually has lots and lots of different names. But it's the one that started me off on this journey. And so citizen experience design is applying design to generate innovations that can help government work better for people. And if you go on Twitter, there's actually a cool community of people who do this stuff. And here's some of my favorite hashtags that you guys should search on later. So civic design, global GovJam just happened this week, which was a bunch of service designers getting together to think about government. PSI Labs, that's Public and Social Innovation Labs. That was the reason I had to stop in Toronto on my way here. There was a global conference for that. And Gov 3.0, which is a course that's taught out of New York University by Beth Novak, who formerly was at the White House doing open government work and is now teaching a course that integrates many design elements into how public servants can work better. And teams of public servants are the main participants in that course. Now, I keep talking about design, and we've talked a lot about design today and here at this conference, but I want to be clear about what I mean by that, because you need to be clear when you go and talk to other people what you mean by that. And the examples that are held up most in our industry are quite shallow. So I want to have a deeper understanding of design. So I think of design on a continuum of maturity. And design can happen by fluke. It can be an accident. Or by default, whatever was handed to you. But design is often thought of as fashion. Here we have my home province in Alberta, and what did they do to improve their image? Well, they chose a new font. And that's actually a beautiful update. Classic logo from the 70s, updated, more fresh. I get that, but it's probably not going to solve our problems at the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? New font, DMV. If we change that from Helvetica to Avenir, that would solve all our problems, right? Maybe not. So we can also think about design as function. How does something work? And a lot of our community in the user experience world thinks about design as function. And that can make a big difference. This is the butterfly ballot used in the presidential election in 2000 that sent George Bush to the White House. If you want to vote for Al Gore, where do you vote? You have to punch what? He's the second choice. We punch the second hole, right? Except this is the second choice, because they stagger them. So you really have to punch the third choice. And enough people in 3 counties in Florida punched that second choice so that George Bush went to the White House. Tremendous impact of functional design. But design goes beyond that. Design is also about fixing problems. It's about making a problem work better. And you can fix problems in lots of different ways. You can take an ambulance to the hospital, or if it's urgent enough, you can take a helicopter. But one of the most powerful things you can do with design is framing. You can redefine the problem. Now, in Alberta, we actually dissolved the Department of Motor Vehicles, and it became privatized, where now small businesses can start their own government registry. This is the one that's closest to my house. It's about 1 kilometer away. And now there are over 200 locations throughout the province so that people are much, much closer to these services. And so those services became distributed, and the queues went away, and the experience improved. And that took a fundamental reframing, a rethinking of what it meant to offer that service. Now, privatization is not always the right answer, and very often it goes wrong. But you have to think about how you can change the decisions that happen in an organization. In government, that means policy. Now, some of you might go, policy what? And others of you might think about forms in triplicate and a bunch of bureaucrats. But that really, policy is the decision DNA of organizations. And you cannot change the world unless you change that DNA. So designers need to be able to work not only in pixels, not only in designing services, but also in the organizations that we work with to design policy so that we can make better decisions. To do that, you need to design for change. And there's three things that we need so that design drives change. First is that we need to be able to share design as a process. And not only in our language, but in the language that will resonate with other people. Design as a capability. What does it do, and what does it offer an organization? And finally, we need to be thinking about design as a culture. Now, design as a process, we have wonderful diagrams about design process. This is one of my favorite ones, the double diamond from the UK Design Council. This is my other favorite one from Damien Newman, the squiggle. But we should never forget that design is fundamentally about looking at people and understanding individual needs. We need to be able to look at a crowd of people and say, these are the particular behaviors, these are the needs, these are the interactions that we need to design for. And that is at the heart of what we do as designers. But as we exercise that process, that we bring certain things to the table. Design has a particular power that just is not as well represented in other disciplines. We have talents and abilities that we can bring to have that organizational capability to apply design to generate innovations. And I'm going to share a few of those with you. The first one is the power of possibility. We think about what if, what could be, what can happen. And that's actually not the way you're taught to solve a problem in business school, having hung out at some business schools myself. Secondly, as you're thinking about what's possible, you go out and engage with the real world. It is incredible how many decisions are made in government or large organizations that are completely disconnected from the people affected by those decisions. As you go out in the real world, you're going to see systems. You're going to start to see connections. You're going to start to see the big picture. But in order to grasp the big picture, you're going to need to create models and prototypes and mock-ups and visual thinking. Ways to actually get a handle on that system because our brains aren't good with abstraction. We need to make it concrete. But as you do that, as you have these models and prototypes, then you can iterate. You can try things out, and you can move quickly to explore options. So iteration lets you reduce risk in an organization, and it lets you find the best kinds of solutions. And all of those things work better when you do it with a group of people who represent a variety of viewpoints. So by applying that collaborative, co-design perspective, you actually generate not only better solutions, but buy-in to those solutions and a robustness to what you're doing that you will never get if you work on your own. The last power of design that might be the most significant is the power to create things that are meaningful for people. By going out and engaging in the real world, you know what really matters. And you can help guide the decisions that are made so that the attention and those scarce resources are focused on what matters most. And last is design as a culture, that you actually get the buy-in and the breadth to start making design a tool that's just used in the organization. It's not something special, it's just how we work. And that's something that you have to start small. Maybe it's not the organization as a whole, maybe it's just your little corner of it. In British Columbia, the province next door to Alberta, and it's where I do most of my work, it's taken us over 4 years to even start to really get to that point. But there's some really exciting things happening. We do have to have patience. So, with process, capability, and culture, we can generate results. And in particular, in government, we can reduce service failures and increase public value. So the key promise that applying design in the public sector makes is that we can actually counteract that paradox by reducing our costs and improving service at the same time. Now, of course, it's easy for me to say that, like, hey, I can say that, but we have to recognize that there's some challenges. It's easy to talk about it, it's harder to do it. And that's true in any organization, especially big organizations. But there's some particular ones that we need to recognize if we're going to start working in government. And we could have a long conversation about this is certainly just the short list. These three in particular. The first one is that a service monopoly where government's the only place you can get a driver's license or that you can pay taxes. And so there's often an inertia that's built up there, and that can be a challenge. It's also an opportunity because of that inertia, then there's often some quick wins and ways that you can think of something differently that can make a big difference. Second is competing interests. We talk a lot about personas, and we say we need to focus on our audiences and know who we're serving. Governments have to serve everybody. They don't get to choose. They don't get to say, well, oh, not you. Not you today. You're not my persona. So you end up making a bunch of trade-offs that you don't have to necessarily make in a commercial company where you can say, oh, that's just not our market. Governments don't have that opportunity. So you have to respect that governments are making choices between many different good things. And you can help them make the choice of how to allocate those resources better. Third, it's just scale. You're operating at a very different scale on time, on how many people you're affecting. That things can take longer, and especially when you start to work in things like policy, if you go and make a change, it may take a year or 2 or 3 in order to start to see the effects of that. But I'm really optimistic that we're going to meet those challenges. I'm optimistic because of what's happening in the world, and I'm optimistic because I get to hang out with people like you, and I get to see that talent, and I hope that it gets focused, not only on whatever you're doing right now, but also on the public sector. As we think about those crocodiles, this is kind of how I think about you guys. So I'm going to close by sharing some stories. I get to travel for different things, and I like to collect stories as I travel. And so these are some from other places and some from my own work. This is Rodrigo Herrera. He lives in Guadalajara in Mexico, and he's actually the head of government innovation for the municipality of Zapopan, one of the 5 municipalities that makes up the larger city of Guadalajara. And in Zapopan, it's a population of just over 1 million people, there were 4 face-to-face service counters. Some of them a 2-hour drive away from the, like it's a big place, so you can drive for 2 hours from the farthest place in the city to get to one of those. So it meant taking a day off of work if you had to go and interact with the government. There's a much longer story here about what's happening, but one of the things that Rodrigo's team did was create a series of kiosks that allowed you to access a bunch of government services, some core government services. And they implemented these kiosks in a variety of places. This kiosk, so this is at City Hall. This is in a mall. You can call the call center, browse any Mexican government website. This is an ATM kind of transactional thing that you can both pay or get payment from, as well as get permits and licenses, which are printed here. And so now, 90% of the population is within 3 kilometers of one of these kiosks. And the time that it takes for somebody to actually have these basic government interactions has been dramatically reduced. It's also done a bunch of other amazing things like helping manage corruption in the public service because we're no longer having to deal with cash quite so much. So next story, Don Iveson in the city of Edmonton. Don actually was a city councilor. He's now our mayor. This is him right here. And in 2010, he was running for re-election as a city councilor. How many of you guys want to watch a campaign video from Canada? Oh, yes. Well, I have the clicker, so people who didn't put up your hand, you're going to have to cover your eyes or something. But it's cool. I think it's the best campaign video ever because he wanted to talk about urban planning. And so he used Lego. So Councillor Iveson actually has a voiceover on this. You can find this on YouTube. But that he wanted to talk about some sophisticated ideas around what the future of the city should be. And so he used Lego to start that conversation and to actually say, this is what matters to me. If you elect me, I'm going to focus on these kinds of things. And it made that an accessible thing. Instead of writing a white paper or talking in inaccessible terms, he was able to make that something that people could participate in. The city's planning department had picked up on something that he did earlier before that and actually ran a planning exercise with citizens. So they built a model neighborhood of the city. And then they invited people to come in and build their own models to be able to actually say, this is what I would like to see in the future. That's actually Don building the house right now. So the models were judged, and the best ones were actually included in an exhibit at our science museum for a few months. And then the model was moved to City Hall, where it's used to talk about the future of the city, especially with school groups that come in, but also with community groups. Parts of the model actually go out and travel. So that's still happening now, and I think it's an important way to make government accessible to people. This next project, not quite as fun, arguably a little bit more significant. It's something that I'm actually still working on right now. We have a meeting next week that is sort of the conclusion of it. And it's looking at domestic violence policy in British Columbia. British Columbia just enacted some new legislation last year, but there's some problems with restraining orders. So if you're afraid of your domestic partner, you can get a restraining order that says stay away. But if you violate that restraining order, it used to be just a civic problem. You'd get a fine, kind of a slap on the wrist, just not a really significant deterrent. The new legislation made it a criminal act. You can go to jail. But actually, criminal offenses have a much higher burden of proof. They're much more stringent to actually stop somebody when they have a criminal matter. And so there was some criticism, well, why aren't you using this more? And so everybody that answered that question answered it from their own perspective. So our team actually went out and did field research where we talked to 60 different people over a whole bunch of perspectives, from judges to lawyers to police to court staff to community groups who supported victims of violence. And in doing that, we generated a complete picture, and we brought people together from those different perspectives to help in the analysis of our design research. And then in extracting patterns and principles and connections from that so that we could see that big system, that we were the first ones to actually get the whole picture of what was happening because we did that work. And then we brought a group of people together from those different areas to generate new options for policy in how we can make families safer. And so those options are actually going next week to a group of senior executives who will have to collaborate to make them happen. And they're going to choose which ones that they're going to fund. So I'll be able to tell you more about that in a month or so. And then the UK Government Digital Service is doing some of the best work in government today. You can follow GDS team. I was there last week. Lisa is the head of user research there. Fantastic, amazing work happening there, in part because of the leadership that they have.
Of the Government Digital Service, which is committed to ensuring that as we reform the delivery of public services, they are designed around the needs of the user rather than has been far too often the case in the past, being designed to suit the convenience of the government.
Gary Streeter. Mr. Speaker.
I'm waiting for other elected members in their own House of Parliament or in their own legislature to make similar commitments. We're actually starting to see that happen in British Columbia to get official commitments from government to use design in order to make better services. So opportunities. What can you guys do? Like, do you need to leave everything that you've been doing and just go work with government? Well, maybe. Maybe not. I think there's lots of things that you can do without taking that necessarily extreme step. In Europe, there's some fantastic things happening. I think Europe is the leading place where government and design are coming together. So lots and lots of interesting stuff happening all over the place. And there are some challenges, of course, but I think there's amazing opportunities here. And that first thing, though, you need to just recognize design does more than just better startups, better apps. We've talked about that today. Design can make a difference, and especially you can make a difference. You need to know that you can make a difference if you choose that, and that you can choose that. Second is to understand the value of design for those organizations. Be able to speak in their language. Understand them just like you would try to understand your users. This is a fundamental argument. You have fewer choices the more you work on a project, and it costs more to make those changes. Or like Frank Lloyd Wright said, you can use an eraser on the drafting board or a sledgehammer on the construction site. That resonates with leaders. That resonates with public servants. But you need to get to know those people. You need to make connections and to share success together. You don't need to be a hero. You need to be a facilitator and a catalyst. So we need to think about where we can connect. That's why I visit places. So I was in the UK, and I had lots and lots. I was on holiday, but I took some time away from the museums and the sites to do some design tourism, to go to GDS and to visit the UK's new policy lab. And that you can find partners, do pilots or prototypes, and then publicize, tell the success stories that you have. And that you guys have the potential to be part of a profound transformation in public design and innovation. I think that the user experience community is well poised to do that if we choose it. I'm going to tell you two last stories to finish. First, the story of citizen experience itself. Citizen experience changes the conversation. It becomes a focus. It helps us know what we should do. It becomes a bridge. It brings people together from different perspectives. And it becomes a compass. It shows us the path that we can take. And you can help. You can put design to work to help reimagine government and to create a culture of opportunity. Now, for this last story, I need your help. You pull out your phones for me, everybody. And Victor, I hope we're ready here. Okay, so if you have your phone out, I want you to turn on your flashlight app or a white screen, something like this. All right. I know more of you have mobiles. Don't we have like insane mobile penetration in Europe? Isn't that what Jason was talking about earlier? So, more. All right. So we have our phones out. We're lit up. I want you to count with me now, okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. I want you to look around. Hold it up. Look around. I see stars. I see amazing potential. I see you guys with the power to make a difference in the world, to change how things work. And as you do so, I hope that you'll think about some of that energy, some of that potential being dedicated to the citizen experience. Obrigado. Thank you. I would love to talk more about this. If you'd like to talk, please do get in touch. So thank you so much. thank you to Bruno for an amazing, amazing event. Thank you, and thank you all.